History is full of moments that were never meant to survive the printed page, but some events were buried not because they were insignificant, but because they revealed a truth America wasn't ready to face. Midnight settles over South Carolina in October 1871. A column of 600 armed black militia members advances through the darkness. Their objective is a plantation house where known Ku Klux Klan leadership is gathered. Inside, 11 men who once believed themselves untouchable are now paralyzed with fear. These are the same individuals who have spent years lynching black citizens with complete impunity. The captain commanding the operation is Jim Williams, a formerly enslaved man who rose to a state-sanctioned military rank. What unfolds in the next minute will be erased from mainstream historical narratives for more than a century, because when those doors are forced open, a foundational myth about power, race, and violence in America collapses instantly. The nation simply could not allow the public to know that black soldiers did not merely resist the Ku Klux Klan, they dismantled them through organized, legal force. To understand how this moment becomes possible, the story must start in 1865. The American Civil War has ended, and 4 million black Americans have been declared legally free. But freedom written into law does not translate into freedom in daily life. Across the former Confederacy, black communities are surrounded by people who have treated them as property for generations. White supremacists refuse to accept defeat on the battlefield. Unable to reinstate slavery through legal systems, they turn to extrajudicial violence. In Tennessee, a small group of former Confederate officers forms a secret society dedicated to restoring white supremacy through intimidation and terror. They call the organization the Ku Klux Klan. Within months, its structure spreads through the South with the speed and reach of a coordinated insurgency. The Klan's strategy is brutally direct. They move under cover of night, concealed beneath white hoods designed to mask their identities and intimidate their targets. They attack any symbol of black autonomy or political participation. A freedman who attempts to vote may return home to find his house burned to the ground. A black political leader who advocates for his community may be dragged from his bed and lynched by a mob. A black family attempting to buy land may be beaten until they agree to remain laborers for their former enslavers. In South Carolina alone, historians estimate that hundreds of black men, women, and children were murdered by Klan activity in a period of 2 years. Local law enforcement often refuses to intervene. State courts decline to prosecute. For the newly freed population, official avenues of protection simply do not exist. But this is where conventional history becomes misleading. Black communities did not face this wave of terror passively. They organized themselves in ways that remain largely absent from school textbooks. Across several southern states, black citizens formed legally recognized state militias. These units were not vigilante groups, nor were they reactionary mobs. They were official military companies authorized by state governments, led by black officers, and trained to defend their communities. In South Carolina, where black voters had helped elect a Republican governor, the state militia became majority black by 1870. Men such as Jim Williams, Robert Smalls, and Prince Rivers did not simply receive weapons. They received legal authority, command structure, and responsibility. For many, the transformation was extraordinary. Individuals who had been enslaved only a few years earlier now held military ranks such as captain and lieutenant. They drilled in formation. They wore uniforms. They followed established chains of command. They possessed the legal power to detain those who committed acts of terror. For the first time since arriving in America in chains, black communities possessed organized military strength sanctioned by state and, at first, federal authorities. White supremacists reacted with immediate panic. Southern newspapers published inflammatory cartoons portraying black soldiers as violent characters. Editorials warned of black political control and falsely claimed that these militias intended to attack white families. Former Confederate officers argued that arming black men would trigger widespread chaos, but none of these claims reflected reality. Black militia members were not seeking revenge or initiating violence. They were doing what militias are designed to do: protect civilians from armed threats. When the Klan entered counties with strong black militia presence, they encountered structured resistance instead of isolated victims. The federal government under President Ulysses S. Grant recognized the escalating crisis. Grant had fought to preserve the Union and abolish slavery, and he was unwilling to allow organized terror to overturn those victories. In 1871, Grant requested that Congress pass new legislation known as the Ku Klux Klan Act. The law granted him expanded powers, including the ability to suspend habeas corpus and deploy federal troops to combat domestic terrorism. Congress approved the measure, and Grant acted quickly. He declared martial law in 9 South Carolina counties and ordered federal soldiers into the region. But here is the detail often omitted. Federal troops did not operate alone. They coordinated directly with black state militias, treating them as legitimate counterparts in a joint effort to suppress organized terror. For a brief but significant moment, the United States government formally supported armed black resistance to white supremacist violence. This shift represented an unprecedented erosion of the old racial hierarchy. Black soldiers who had once been punished for attempting to read now participated in operations to arrest their former enslavers. Black officers interrogated Confederate veterans about crimes committed under the cover of night. The structure of power in the South was being reversed through lawful force, and this reversal was both intentional and effective. By the fall of 1871, tensions in York County, South Carolina, had reached their breaking point. A black militia member was lynched by Klan members as a deliberate warning. The message was unambiguous. Any black citizen who joined the militia would face death. White officials expected black communities to retreat in fear. Instead, Jim Williams decided that enough was enough. He had witnessed years of unchecked terror. He had seen families destroyed and community leaders murdered. He had listened to excuses from white authorities who refused to intervene. He understood that waiting for assistance would only guarantee more deaths. Williams mobilized all 600 members of his company. They began a coordinated night march conducted with military precision. They carried no torches and made no unnecessary sound. Their target was the plantation of a well-known Klan leader who had openly bragged about participating in multiple lynchings. When they arrived, Williams positioned his men in a complete perimeter around the residence, ensuring no possible escape route. The assault team moved in. The doors of the house were breached, and the men responsible for years of terror suddenly faced disciplined black soldiers acting under legal authority. Williams' company arrested 11 Klan members, secured them, and transported them to federal custody. Not a single shot was fired. The operation demonstrated discipline, organization, and the effectiveness of legitimate armed defense. And for white supremacists, that level of coordination was terrifying. Word of the successful raid spread quickly through black communities across South Carolina. The message was clear. Organized protection worked. Resistance backed by legal authority was effective. And for the first time, the Klan's campaign of terror met a force capable of pushing back. This should be one of the most celebrated victories in American history. A story of an oppressed population using legal authority, military discipline, and collective courage to defeat their oppressors. It should be in textbooks. It should be in classrooms. It should be common knowledge. But that is not what happens. Northern whites begin watching events unfold in the South with visible discomfort. Illustrations in their newspapers show black soldiers with rifles detaining white men. Reports circulate describing black captains interrogating Confederate veterans. The North realizes that armed, organized black communities represent a fundamental shift in power, and many of them fear that shift. Industrialists worry that black laborers might draw inspiration from this and organize their own resistance. Northern Democrats see political value in abandoning Reconstruction to win back white Southern voters. Even some Northern Republicans quietly decide that a controlled version of white supremacy is easier to manage than genuine black equality. And so, support collapses. Federal troops are withdrawn. Funding for black militia operations disappears. Elections across the South fell into the hands of white supremacist Redeemer governments through fraud, intimidation, and violence. And the moment they take power, they move aggressively to dismantle black militias. Weapons are seized. Companies are disbanded. Black officers are arrested under fabricated charges of insurrection, the same accusations once used against Nat Turner and Denmark Vesey. The message is unmistakable. Black self-defense becomes illegal the moment it becomes effective. Captain Jim Williams, the man who proved that organized black resistance could destroy the Klan, is murdered by white supremacists in 1872. He is lynched in broad daylight. His killers face no trial, no investigation, no accountability. The same legal system he used to arrest terrorists now shields the men who kill him. And that murder sends a message to every black leader in the South. This is what happens when you win. Then the final insult arrives. the one that lasts more than a century. Historians erase the entire story. Textbooks rewrite Reconstruction as a failure caused by supposed black incompetence. They claim black citizens were unprepared for freedom, corrupt in government, unable to govern themselves. They describe the era as chaotic, while ignoring the fact that black militias had brought order by suppressing domestic terrorism. They frame the tragedy of Reconstruction as a Southern collapse, rather than what it truly was, a federal abandonment of black communities to white supremacist violence. For 100 years, American children have been taught that the Klan was unstoppable, that black people were helpless, that only white Northern charity ever protected them. It is a perfect inversion of reality. Here is the truth they never taught you. Here is the revelation that flips the entire narrative. The original Ku Klux Klan did not fade away because white Americans grew more moral. It collapsed in 1871 and 1872 because black militias destroyed it in direct conflict. They arrested its leadership. They crippled its networks. They made the counties ungovernable for terrorists. They beat the Klan militarily and did it with discipline, legality, and precision. The Klan only re-emerged in 1915 because black communities had been systematically disarmed for 4 decades. Look at the timeline. The second Klan, the one with millions of members, only succeeds because white lawmakers spent 40 years making sure that what happened in South Carolina in 1871 can never happen again. Every gun law written in the South after Reconstruction has one purpose: prevent black communities from arming themselves. Every restriction on assembly, every ban on black organizations, every legal barrier to blacks, all of it traces back to the terror. White supremacists felt the night black soldiers marched with rifles and authority. The entire architecture of Jim Crow relies on black defenselessness. Lynchings only thrive in communities stripped of weapons and organization. The Klan only rides when they know their victims cannot shoot back. The story of Captain Jim Williams and the black militia companies is not lost history. It is not forgotten by accident. It is suppressed, deliberately erased, because it proves something white supremacy cannot allow to exist in America's memory. It proves that when black communities have resources, organization, and the legal means to defend themselves, they do not merely endure racist violence, they defeat it. They do not require white saviors. They do not require slow progress granted from above. They require white society to stop actively blocking their power. Jim Williams demonstrated this with absolute clarity. He showed that armed self-defense is not chaos. It is not revenge eaties hoosties. He proved that black Americans, with discipline and legal authority, could protect their neighborhoods, arrest their oppressors, and reshape the South. And that is exactly why his story was erased. Because if future generations learned what happened in 1871, they would inherit a blueprint for resistance that white supremacy could not control. So the next time you hear someone claim Reconstruction failed, or that the Klan was invincible, or that black Americans were passive victims waiting for white rescue, remember Tees. Remember October 1871. Remember 600 black soldiers advancing in silence. Remember Captain Jim Williams forcing open the doors of a terrorist stronghold. Remember the 90% drop in Klan violence wherever black militias operated. Remember that for a brief, extraordinary moment, black military organization crushed white supremacist terrorism so thoroughly that the only way to undo their victory was to erase it from history. Their names were removed from textbooks. Their achievements were buried beneath myths of black incapacity and white benevolence. But the victory was real. The Klan ran. The terrorists fled. The oppressors were arrested, tried, and convicted. It happened. It worked. And it terrified the people who needed black communities to remain powerless. Because once you know this story, you know the truth. Black freedom has always been won through black resistance, not white permission. That is the lesson. That is the truth.